been revealed that the Home Office is reserving 16,000 homes for asylum seekers, with private landlords reportedly being offered a fully paid 5-year tenancy to take them in.
Well, why wouldn't they say no then? But with Brits currently struggling to find affordable accommodation, there are concerns the plans could deplete much-needed homes for young workers and families. Of course, there are always trade-offs. Joining us is the founder of Landlord Action, Paul Shamplina. Paul, this is quite a good offer then from the Home Office to private landlords. We'll secure a 5-year tenancy for you. You don't need to worry about your property for 5 years. You know you're going to get the cash when you're due it. Quite a good deal.
Well, look, I don't think you can blame landlords. I think you've got to blame the government for the debacle that we're in with regard to the housing shortage that we've got. I mean, look, there's £8 million a day being spent in hotels. They're closing 50 hotels. They have closed 50 hotels down with asylum seekers, plan to close another 50 down by the end of the year. I mean, look, we've got 1.2 million people on council waiting lists, and we have a rental stock crisis. It's what can I say? It's decades and decades of failure to build social housing and affordability of housing. You know, only last year, Emily, there was only 9,000 council properties built in 2023, which was a disgrace.
No, it's an interesting point that you raised there, Paul. Do you think that to some extent, where people have been saying get asylum seekers out of hotels, but then not building new accommodation on, for example, former RAF sites, there's been a lot of campaigning about where people shouldn't be put, and therefore perhaps what happens is that they then go into stuff that is already built rather than building new things?
Well, I mean, look, Tom, that is the trade-off. I mean, you know, I drove past an RAF, an old site in Lincoln, and I think that's the site you're talking about. And there was loads of campaigning. They're intense, and they're campaigning night after night not to have them put in that facility. You know, putting housing asylum seekers in streets, in house of multiple occupation, in normal residential properties, that can be challenging because obviously there's integration and there's a lot of issues. I mean, we just have a massive housing crisis. I've been in this industry for 34 years. I've never known a housing crisis like it. Affordability for tenants is a massive problem. I mean, just alone, there's 105,000 households in temporary accommodation, 10% increase from last year, which 62% of those have children.
Well, there's a housing crisis, but there's also the question of priorities, isn't there? And the government comes out and says British homes for British workers, British people should get priority when it comes to social housing lists. And then you see that the government is actually buying up huge numbers of properties to go directly to asylum seekers, while there are workers and young families and British people who haven't got a look in.
That's what's happened, Emily. That's the reality. The government are doing something now where they're desperate for properties because obviously we've had a big migration of asylum seekers, and the affordability of 8 million. But let's just think about that. £8 million a day is being spent at hotels. I mean, I can give you an example. I put on a charity boxing event every year, and it was the Holiday Inn in North London, and it's been closed for 4 years. Not open for the public. I mean, it is a big issue. There's a lot of hotels that have been closed down. What they're trying to do is they're reaching out to landlords and saying, we take 5-year leases.
Well, are the government undercutting the average person on the street with this? Because they're promising 5 years tenancy. Presumably they can get a better deal because they can pay for it in advance. Is that what's happening here?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, landlords are individuals. They're not banks. Let's be very clear about that. There's 2.4 million landlords out there. There's 4.4 million households out there. Landlords are contacted, whether it's by councils or by the Home Office. And if they are offered a 5-year lease, which means that they don't have any void periods, the property being empty, they look after the property, then they will sign up for it. It is a supply and demand, as I said, within crisis. And, I think the answer is, from what I've just said to you, it is decades of house building failure, of affordability. And I think that the answer of 9,000 properties being built last year, Emily, says it all, doesn't it?
No, well, Paul Shamplina, thank you so much for talking us through this really concerning issue here. Fascinating to get the perspective there from the founder of Landlord Action.
Yes.